Hope heard the ring box snap shut before she understood what she was looking at. Not the one meant for her. A different one, in a different woman's hand, held up high enough for the whole rooftop to see, catching the string lights like it had been waiting all night for its moment. Yes, the woman said, breathless, and the crowd around her started clapping before Hope's brain had even finished processing whose voice that was. Jae-Won was on one knee, her fiance, the man she'd spent 3 years building a life with. Down on one knee, at his own 30th birthday party, in front of 200 of his family's guests, proposing to a woman who was not her. Hope stood very still near the edge of the terrace, a glass of wine going warm in her hand, and waited for her body to do something. Cry, scream, anything. Instead, she just watched, the way you watch a car accident happen in slow motion from the wrong side of the street, too far away to stop it, and too close to look away. The woman's name was Yuna. Hope knew that much. She'd heard it whispered around Jae-Won's family for months, always followed by a pause that meant more than the words did. Yuna, his first love. Yuna, the one before Hope. Yuna, who moved to New York 6 weeks ago and somehow ended up on the guest list for his birthday. Hope hadn't thought much of it. She trusted him. That was the joke of it, wasn't it? She'd spent 3 years trusting a man who was apparently still holding a ring he hadn't given her, just in case the right woman walked back into his life. Hope. She turned. Her best friend, Adayaze, had pushed through the crowd, her face pale with the particular horror of watching your friend's life fall apart in real time and not knowing whether to comfort her or start throwing punches. "I didn't know," Adayaze said quickly. "I swear to you, I had no idea he was going to." "I know." Hope's voice came out steadier than she felt. Nobody knew. That was the point. Across the terrace, Jae-Won was still on one knee, Yuna's hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face like she'd rehearsed this exact reaction. His family surrounded them, already reaching for phones, already capturing the moment for whatever story they'd tell later. Nobody had looked at Hope once. It was as if she'd already stopped existing the second Jae-Won opened that box. She thought about the 3 years. The apartment they'd picked out together, the fights about whose family to spend Christmas with, the nights she'd stayed up late helping him rehearse pitches for his father's company because she believed in him more than his own family ever had. She thought about how she used to introduce him as "my person," back when that word still meant something. She thought about how humiliating it was going to be to walk out of here alone. That was when she saw him. Across the terrace, near the bar, a man she'd never met stood with his hands in his pockets, watching the proposal with an expression that wasn't celebratory at all. It was cold, sharp, the look of someone watching an enemy win something they hadn't earned. She recognized him only because Jae-Won had mentioned him once, months ago, in the tight, clipped voice he used whenever the subject came up. Ethan Cho. The name of the man who'd beaten Jae-Won's family company out of a 9-figure contract 2 years ago, and who Jae-Won's father still referred to at dinner, as if the words themselves tasted bad. Hope didn't remember deciding to walk toward him. She only remembered that her feet moved before her mind caught up, cutting through the crowd, past people who were still clapping, past a waiter balancing a tray of champagne meant for a toast that was no longer hers to receive. Ethan turned when she was still several steps away, like he'd felt her coming. "I know this is insane," Hope said, stopping in front of him, close enough that she could see the surprise flicker behind his eyes before he masked it. "I know we've never met. I know this is the strangest thing anyone has ever asked you, but I need you to kiss me, right now, before I lose whatever's left of my nerve." For a moment, he said nothing, studying her face like he was trying to figure out if this was a trap. Behind her, she could hear Jae-Won's mother saying something loudly to a cluster of relatives, the words "finally," the right one carrying clearly across the terrace, and something in Hope's chest cracked wide open. "Ask me again," Ethan said quietly, "and mean it. Not because you're angry, Because you actually want to. Hope's breath caught. Nobody had ever asked her that. Not once, in 3 years with Jae-Won, had anyone stopped to ask if she actually wanted the thing she was reaching for, or if she was just reaching because it was there. I want to, she said, and for the first time all night, it was true. He kissed her like he'd been waiting for permission his entire life. One hand found her waist, careful, like he was giving her every chance to step back if she changed her mind, and when she didn't, he pulled her closer, and the rooftop went quiet around them the same way it had gone quiet for Jae-Won's proposal, except this silence had teeth in it. When they broke apart, Ethan looked down at her, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Well, he said, low enough that only she could hear. That got their attention. Hope turned, and every single person on that rooftop was staring at her now, including Jae-Won, who was still half kneeling, Yuna's ring still on her finger, his face draining of color like he'd just watched something he thought he owned walk away without asking permission. Hope. Jae-Won's voice cracked across the terrace. He was moving now, pushing past his own mother, past Yuna, whose triumphant smile had curdled into something confused and furious. What are you doing? Enjoying your party, Hope said, and was surprised by how calm it sounded coming out of her mouth. Isn't that what we're all here for? You kissed him. Jae-Won's eyes flicked to Ethan with a hatred so sudden and total, it looked almost like fear. Do you have any idea who that is? I don't, Hope said, but I have a feeling you're about to make it very interesting. Behind Jae-Won, Yuna had gone completely still, the ring on her finger suddenly looking less like a victory and more like a question nobody wanted to answer out loud. And somewhere in the back of the crowd, Hope heard someone whisper the words that would follow her out of that party and into everything that came after. Poor Hope, she didn't even see it coming. She just hadn't let herself believe it until it was standing right in front of her, ring box open, 3 years of her life folding shut in real time. Ethan's hand found the small of her back, steady, grounding. I think, he said, glancing at Jae-Won with something close to satisfaction, we should get out of here before he says something he can't take back. Hope looked at Jae-Won one last time. At the man who used to be hers, standing between the woman he'd just proposed to and the fiancé he'd just publicly humiliated, looking, for the first time in 3 years, completely unsure of what he actually wanted. Good luck with your engagement, she said, and let Ethan lead her away. The elevator ride down from the rooftop was silent, except for the soft hum of the cables and the occasional ding of passing floors. Hope stared at her own reflection in the polished doors, waiting for the tears to come. They didn't. What came instead was a strange, hollow calm, like she was watching her own life happen through glass. You don't have to talk, Ethan said, standing a careful distance away, hands back in his pockets. But if you want to, I'm told I'm a decent listener. I don't even know your last name, Hope said, and I just kissed you in front of 200 people. Ethan Cho. He offered a small, wry smile. And for what it's worth, I've been kissed under stranger circumstances. Once, at a shareholder dinner, a woman kissed me to make her business partner jealous into signing a deal. Worked, actually. Terrible for my dignity, excellent for her quarterly earnings. Despite everything, Hope let out a short laugh, surprised it was even possible tonight. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to remind you that you're not the first person to do something reckless at a party. You're just the first person I've wanted to do it with. He said it lightly, like it cost him nothing, but something in his eyes told her it wasn't nothing at all. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and Hope's phone was already buzzing in her clutch, over and over, a relentless drumbeat of notifications. She didn't need to look to know who it was. You should turn that off, Ethan said, watching her face. Whatever he has to say tonight isn't going to be worth hearing. He's my fiancé. Was, Ethan corrected gently. I believe the ring on the other woman's finger settled that particular question for you. Hope's throat tightened. She hadn't cried yet, not once, and she was terrified that if she let herself acknowledge it out loud, the dam would break right there in the marble lobby of a building she didn't even recognize. I need to go home, she said. I'll get you a car. You don't have to. I know. He was already pulling out his phone, unbothered, like taking care of a stranger who'd just kissed him and ruined her own engagement was simply the natural next step in his evening. I want to. The car arrived within minutes, and Ethan held the door for her, not moving to get in himself. Thank you, Hope said, for playing along tonight. I know that wasn't fair to ask of you. You didn't ask me to play along. Ethan crouched slightly so he was eye level with her through the open door, his expression suddenly serious. I don't do things I don't want to do, Miss Bennett. Hope Bennett. Hope Bennett. He said her name like he was testing the weight of it. I don't do things I don't want to do, so don't apologize for something you didn't force me into. She nodded, unable to find words for how much that small mercy meant after a night built entirely on humiliation. The car pulled away before she could think of anything else to say, and she watched him through the back window, hands in his pockets, growing smaller against the glass and steel behind him, until the car turned a corner and he disappeared entirely. Her phone had 31 missed calls by the time she got home. She didn't listen to a single voicemail. She sat on the edge of her bed still in her dress, makeup smudged from a party she hadn't even cried at yet, and finally, alone, let herself fall apart. The knocking started at midnight. Hope, please open the door. I need to explain. Jae-Won's voice through the wood sounded nothing like the man who'd knelt in front of Yuna 2 hours earlier. It cracked in places, desperate in a way she'd never heard from him before, not even during the worst fights of their relationship. She didn't move from the couch where she'd been sitting with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring at nothing. Hope, please. It's not what it looked like. You got down on one knee, she called back, her voice flat. In front of 200 people, with a ring, for a woman who isn't me, I don't think there's a version of that sentence that means something other than exactly what it looked like. Silence on the other side of the door. Then quieter. I panicked. Seeing her again, it brought back things I thought I'd buried a long time ago. It didn't mean I stopped loving you. It meant exactly that, Jae-Won. Hope stood, finally, and walked to the door, resting her palm flat against it without opening it. You don't propose to someone by accident. You don't get down on one knee because you panicked. You do it because some part of you had already decided she mattered more than what we built. I made a mistake. You made a choice. There's a difference, and I'm done pretending there isn't. There was a long pause, long enough that Hope thought he might have finally left. Then his voice came again, lower this time, almost bitter. Who was that man? The one you kissed? And there it was, not an apology, not even real regret. Just the question that had clearly been eating at him the entire drive over, more urgent to him than anything he'd said before it. Does it matter? Do you have any idea who Ethan Cho is to my family? I'm starting to get a general idea, Hope said, and for the first time all night, something like satisfaction crept into her voice. Judging by the way you just said his name, like it physically hurt you. He destroyed my father's company 2 years ago, took a deal we'd spent 18 months building, and walked away with it in 3 weeks, and you just kissed him, at my party, in front of my entire family. Your engagement party to a different woman, Hope reminded him, which you conveniently keep forgetting to mention. Jae-Won didn't answer that. The silence said everything his pride wouldn't let him admit out loud, that somehow, in his mind, her small act of desperate defiance had wounded him more deeply than his own public betrayal had wounded her. Go home, Jae-Won. Hope said quietly. Go home to your fiance. She didn't wait for a response. She walked away from the door and didn't look back. And eventually, after another 10 minutes of silence, she heard his footsteps retreat down the hallway. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she sat back down on the couch, pulled the blanket tighter around herself, and cried until there was nothing left, mourning not the man who'd left, but the version of her own life she'd spent 3 years building around him. Her phone buzzed once more, close to 2 in the morning. Not Jae-Won this time, a number she didn't recognize. I don't usually do this, but I found myself thinking about whether you made it home safely. Ethan. Hope stared at the message for a long moment, thumb hovering over the screen. Then, for the first time all night, she smiled, small and tired, but real. I made it home. Barely survived the doorstep visit from my ex, but I'm alive. The reply came almost instantly, like he'd been waiting. He came to your apartment? After tonight? Apparently my humiliation wasn't complete enough for one evening. I'm sorry you had to deal with that alone. If it helps at all, you handled tonight with more grace than most people manage on their best day, let alone their worst. Hope read the message twice, feeling something in her chest loosen slightly for the first time since she'd watched that ring box open on the rooftop. Thank you for everything tonight. Get some sleep, Hope Bennett. Something tells me tomorrow is going to be complicated. He had no idea how right he was. By the time Hope woke up the next morning, her name was already trending in circles she never wanted to be part of. Someone at the party had recorded the kiss, a shaky 10-second clip that had somehow made its way into a group chat, then a subreddit devoted to wealthy Korean American families, then finally onto a gossip account with 500,000 followers that specialized in exactly this kind of humiliation. Reed Development heir proposes to childhood sweetheart at his own party. Fiance responds by kissing his family's biggest rival. Hope read the caption 3 times before she set the phone face down on her kitchen counter and pressed both palms flat against the cool marble, breathing slowly, the way she taught anxious brides to breathe before they walked down the aisle. It was strange, doing this for herself instead of someone else. Jae arrived 20 minutes later, with 2 coffees and an expression that told Hope she'd already seen everything. Okay, Jae said, setting the cups down and sliding onto a stool at the counter. First, how are you actually doing, not the version you're about to tell me. Second, what in God's name possessed you to kiss Ethan Cho? I don't know, Hope admitted, wrapping both hands around her coffee. I saw him standing there, and something in me just needed Jae-Won to feel 1/10 of what I was feeling. I wasn't thinking about consequences. I wasn't thinking about who he even was. He's not just anybody, Hope. Ethan Cho's company outbid Reed Development on the Lakeshore contract 2 years ago. Jae-Won's father still brings it up at every family dinner like it happened last week. You didn't just kiss a stranger. You kissed the one person on earth Jae-Won's family considers an enemy. Hope closed her eyes. I really didn't know that when I walked up to him. Would it have stopped you if you had? Hope thought about it honestly, turning the question over instead of answering on reflex. No, she said finally. Probably not. Jae smiled despite herself. There she is. I was wondering when the old Hope would show back up. Her phone buzzed against the counter, and this time it wasn't Jae-Won. It was a text from her mother. 3 words that somehow carried more weight than anything the internet had thrown at her that morning. Call me. Now. The conversation that followed was not gentle. Hope's mother had raised her alone after her father left, had worked 2 jobs to put her through college, and had never once let Hope forget how hard-won every piece of stability in their life had been. She loved Hope fiercely, and that fierceness came out sideways sometimes, in worry disguised as criticism. Do you understand what you've done? Her mother said, voice tight through the phone. That family has connections in every industry that matters in this city. You embarrass them publicly, Hope. Do you think that goes away quietly? He humiliated me first, Mom. In front of everyone. I know that, baby, and I'm not defending him. But you have to be smarter than this. You can't let your heart make decisions your future has to live with. Hope pressed her fingers to her temple. So what was I supposed to do? Just stand there and smile while he proposed to another woman? I'm saying there's a difference between protecting your pride and protecting your peace. I just don't want you trading one heartbreak for a bigger one. Hope didn't have an answer for that, not one that felt honest, because some quiet part of her was already wondering the exact same thing. The next few days moved in a strange blur. Bennett events had 3 weddings on the calendar, and Hope threw herself into the work with a focus that bordered on obsessive, if only because it was easier than sitting still with her own thoughts. She fielded calls from clients who'd clearly seen the video and were too polite to mention it directly, their voices carrying that particular careful sympathy people used when they didn't know what else to say. Ethan texted twice a day. Never anything demanding, never anything that asked more of her than she had to give. Small things. A photo of a ridiculous dog he'd passed on his morning walk. A question about how her week was going. Once, late at night, a simple line that stayed with her longer than it probably should have. You don't have to perform strength with me. I already know you have it. You proved that on the rooftop. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone to say that until he did. Jae-Won, meanwhile, would not stop calling. He showed up outside her office on Thursday, waiting by her car with an expression that mixed desperation and wounded pride in a way that made her stomach turn. You haven't answered a single one of my calls, he said. That was the intention, yes. Hope, please, just give me 5 minutes. You had 3 years, Jae-Won. I think 5 minutes now is a strange thing to ask for. His jaw tightened. This is about him, isn't it? Ethan, you're punishing me by parading around with him. Hope actually laughed, short and disbelieving. I haven't seen Ethan Cho since the night of your party. We've texted. That's it. And even if we hadn't, you don't get to stand here and act wounded about who I choose to see, considering you got engaged to someone else 4 days ago. I'm not engaged, he said quickly, too quickly. I never gave her the ring officially. I've had time to think, and I made a mistake that night. Seeing Yuna again, it stirred up old feelings, but it wasn't real, Hope. What we have is real. Had, Hope corrected. What we had. And it stopped being real the second you decided a woman you hadn't seen in years mattered more than the one standing beside you for 3. She got in her car before he could respond, hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel as she pulled out of the lot, watching him grow smaller in the rearview mirror, standing exactly where she'd left him. That night, she told Ethan everything, the words spilling out over dinner at a quiet restaurant he'd suggested, one without cameras or crowds, just soft lighting and enough privacy for her to finally breathe. He showed up at my office today, she said. Told me the proposal wasn't real, that he made a mistake. Ethan set down his glass, watching her carefully. Do you believe him? No, Hope said, and was surprised by how certain she felt. I think he's realizing what he lost, not what he actually wants. There's a difference between missing someone and loving them enough to choose them in front of everyone who matters. That's a wiser thing to say than most people manage a week out from something like that. I plan weddings for a living. I've watched enough people say vows they didn't mean to recognize the difference between love and performance. She looked up at him. You've never once asked me for anything since that night. Why? Ethan considered the question for a long moment, like he wanted to give her an answer that actually meant something instead of something easy. Because I watched a man humiliate you in front of everyone who was supposed to celebrate you, and then watched you walk across that terrace and choose your own dignity instead of falling apart. I'm not interested in being someone who takes advantage of that. When you're ready for something more than dinner and text messages, you'll tell me. Until then, I'm not going anywhere. Hope felt something shift in her chest, warm and unfamiliar. the kind of feeling she hadn't let herself have in longer than she wanted to admit. She didn't know yet that 3 tables away, half hidden behind a pillar, Yuna was watching them both with an expression that had nothing celebratory left in it at all. Yuna waited until Hope and Ethan had left before she allowed herself to move, sliding into the seat they'd vacated, like she needed to sit in the warmth of it to understand what she'd just witnessed. Her hands were trembling, and not from the cold. She hadn't expected this. When Jae-Won knelt in front of her on that rooftop, she'd told herself it was fate finally correcting a mistake she'd made years ago, walking away from him for a career overseas she'd since come to regret. She hadn't expected the woman he left behind to become someone worth watching, someone worth worrying about. She pulled out her phone and called Jae-Won before she could think better of it. "She's with him again," Yuna said, the moment he picked up. "Ethan Cho. I just watched them have dinner together. It wasn't casual, Jae-Won." He looked at her like... She stopped herself, unable to finish the sentence, unwilling to give the observation the weight it deserved. "Like what?" Jae-Won's voice had gone tight. "Like he's not planning on letting her go." The silence on the other end of the line lasted long enough that Yuna checked to see if the call had dropped. "I need to see her," Jae-Won finally said, more to himself than to Yuna. "Jae-Won, we're supposed to be." "I know what we're supposed to be." His voice was sharp now, sharper than she'd heard from him since she'd come back into his life. "I'll call you later, Yuna." He hung up before she could say anything else, and Yuna sat alone at the table, staring at the 2 empty wine glasses Hope and Ethan had left behind, feeling something cold settle low in her stomach. She had come back for Jae-Won because some part of her believed she was owed a second chance at the life she'd walked away from. She hadn't accounted for the possibility that he might spend that second chance chasing someone else entirely. Across town, Hope had no idea any of this was happening. She was standing in her kitchen at 9 the next morning, going through invoices for an upcoming wedding, when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Hope Bennett," she answered, professional out of habit. "Miss Bennett, this is David Reyes. I'm reaching out on behalf of Bennett Events regarding a potential venue partnership for the Whitlock wedding next month." The man's voice was smooth, businesslike, and something about it made the hair on Hope's arms stand up before she could name why. "I wanted to discuss some concerns that have come up regarding your recent public visibility." Hope set down the invoice she'd been holding. "I'm sorry. Who did you say you were with?" "I represent Reed Development's hospitality division. We've partnered with several of the venues on your upcoming client list." A pause, deliberate and heavy. "Given the recent media attention surrounding your personal life, there's some concern about whether continuing that partnership serves either of our interests." The realization landed slowly, then all at once. This wasn't a venue partnership call. This was Jae-Won's family, reaching into her business, using the one thing she'd built entirely on her own to punish her for refusing to disappear quietly. "Are you telling me Reed Development is threatening to pull venue access from my clients because of a personal matter that has nothing to do with my professional work?" "I wouldn't characterize it as a threat, Miss Bennett. Simply a business consideration." Hope's hand tightened around the phone. 4 years of building Bennett Events from nothing, of taking calls at midnight and crying in bathroom stalls at other people's weddings because her own life felt like it was falling apart, and now the family of the man who'd humiliated her was trying to reach into that too. "Tell whoever sent you to make this call," Hope said, voice steady despite the anger rising in her chest, "that Bennett Events has built relationships with venues across this entire city, not just the ones Reed Development happens to own a stake in. If you'd like to end the partnership, I'll have new arrangements finalized by end of week. But if you're calling to intimidate me into staying quiet about something that happened at a party I didn't ask to attend, you can tell your employer I don't respond well to threats." She hung up before he could answer, hands shaking now, not from fear, but from the particular fury of watching someone try to take something you'd built with your own 2 hands. She called Ethan without fully deciding to. They're going after my business, she said, the words tumbling out before he'd even finished saying hello. Reed Development. Someone just called pretending to be about a venue partnership and basically threatened to pull contracts unless I disappear quietly. There was a beat of silence on the line, and when Ethan spoke again, his voice had changed, lower and sharper than she'd heard it before. Give me a name. Ethan, I don't need you to fight this for me. I'm not asking to fight it for you, he said. I'm asking because I know exactly how Reed Development operates, and I've spent 2 years building relationships with every venue owner they've tried to pressure the same way. If they're threatening your business because of me, that's a fight I already know how to win. Hope closed her eyes, torn between the instinct to handle everything herself, the way she always had, and the unfamiliar comfort of someone offering to stand beside her instead of asking her to be smaller. His name was David Reyes, she said finally. He said he represents their hospitality division. I know exactly who that is. A pause. Hope, I need you to understand something. This isn't about you being caught in the middle of something. This is about a family that's used intimidation as a business strategy for longer than I've been alive, and they picked the wrong person to target this time. Why does that sound like you're about to do something reckless? Because I might be. She could hear the small smile in his voice, even through the tension. Trust me, I'm very good at reckless when it's aimed at the right people. That evening, Jae-Won showed up at her apartment for the second time that week, and this time he didn't knock politely. He pounded on the door with a fist, calling her name loud enough that she was sure her neighbors could hear. Hope, open the door. We need to talk about what your boyfriend is doing to my family's business dealings. Hope opened the door slowly, arms crossed, unwilling to let him see how much his sudden presence still unsettled her. My boyfriend? Don't play games with me. Ethan Cho has been calling every venue partner my family has relationships with for the last 6 hours. Do you have any idea what you've started? I started it? Hope's voice rose despite herself. Your family called my business this morning and threatened to destroy contracts I've spent years building because you couldn't handle the fact that I kissed someone else after you humiliated me in front of 200 people. If anyone started something, Jae-Won, it was you, the moment you got down on one knee for a different woman at your own engagement party. Jae-Won's face went through several expressions at once, anger and guilt, and something that looked almost like grief. I never should have let Yuna back into my life, he said quietly, and for a moment, Hope almost believed the regret in his voice was real. I keep thinking about you. About us. About how easy everything used to be before all of this. It wasn't easy, Jae-Won. It just looked easy from where you were standing, because I was the one holding it all together. Hope's voice softened despite herself, not out of forgiveness but out of a tired kind of clarity. You don't get to destroy something and then miss it once someone else starts building on the wreckage. Is that what he's doing? Building something? Hope didn't answer right away, because she wasn't entirely sure herself, not yet. But she knew this much. Whatever Ethan Cho was doing, it didn't come with the particular cruelty of a man choosing someone else in front of a crowd, and that alone made it worth finding out. Go home, Jae-Won, she said again, quieter this time. And stop calling my clients venues before you cost people jobs that have nothing to do with our history. She closed the door before he could respond, and this time, when she pressed her back against it and slid down to sit on the floor, she wasn't crying. She was thinking, carefully, about how quickly the ground beneath her had started to shift, and how strange it was that the person steadying it wasn't the one who'd promised to for 3 years. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. Handled. Every venue partner has confirmed they're staying with Bennett Events. Reed Development won't be pulling anything. Hope stared at the message, something unfamiliar unfolding slowly in her chest. How did you manage that so fast? I told you. I know exactly how to win this particular fight. Dinner tomorrow? I think we both deserve one night that has nothing to do with either of our families." She smiled for the first time all day and typed back a single word. Yes. Dinner with Ethan became a Tuesday tradition, then a Tuesday and Friday tradition, then something that no longer needed a day attached to it at all. He never rushed her. He never asked the questions she braced herself for after every failed date she'd been on in her 20s, the ones that circled back to Jae-Won, to the video, to what people were saying online. He simply showed up, steady and unbothered by the noise around them, and let her set the pace of everything between them. It was 2 weeks after the venue call that she finally asked him the question that had been sitting at the back of her mind since the night they met. "Why did you actually go along with the kiss that first night?" She turned her wine glass slowly by the stem, watching the candlelight catch inside it. "You didn't know me. You had no reason to make yourself part of my mess." Ethan was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that told her he was choosing his words carefully instead of reaching for something easy. 2 years ago, Jae-Won's father tried to bury my company before it even had a chance to exist. Called every investor I'd approached, told them I was unstable, untrustworthy, not worth the risk. I built everything I have now by refusing to let that stop me. He met her eyes. "When I saw you walk across that terrace toward me, I recognized something. You were doing the same thing I did. Refusing to let someone else's cruelty decide how your story ended." Hope hadn't expected that answer, hadn't expected to feel so completely seen by someone she'd known for less than a month. That's a very generous read of a woman having a public breakdown. "I don't think it was a breakdown," Ethan said. "I think it was the first honest thing you'd done in years." She thought about that long after she got home that night, lying awake staring at her ceiling, turning the words over like they might mean something different in the dark than they had at the table. The peace didn't last. 3 weeks after the party, Hope received an invitation she hadn't expected. A formal one, embossed and heavy in her hands, addressed to Bennett Events for a charity gala hosted by the Korean American Business Alliance. She almost declined out of instinct until she saw the small handwritten note tucked inside. "Hope, thought you should know Jae-Won's family is a major sponsor this year. Come anyway. You've earned the right to walk into any room you choose. Ethan." She went. The gala was held in a ballroom draped in soft gold light, the kind of event she would have planned herself in another life, and for a moment, walking in on Ethan's arm in a deep emerald dress, she felt something close to triumph. Heads turned, whispers followed. She didn't flinch from a single one of them. Jae-Won found her near the dessert table an hour into the evening, alone for once, Yuna nowhere in sight. "You look happy," he said, and the words came out strange, like they cost him something to say. "I am," Hope said simply. "With him." It wasn't a question. "With myself, actually. He's just good company while I figure that part out." She studied Jae-Won's face, the tired lines that hadn't been there 3 years ago, the way his eyes kept drifting toward the door like he was watching for someone. "Where's Yuna tonight?" Jae-Won's jaw tightened. "We're not together anymore." That surprised her more than she expected it to. "What happened?" She realized I wasn't giving her what she wanted. Full attention, certainty. He laughed, short and bitter. "Funny, considering that's exactly what I failed to give you for the last month before I proposed to her." Hope didn't say anything, letting the silence sit between them, unwilling to fill it with comfort he hadn't earned. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," Jae-Won said quietly. "I keep hoping if I say it enough times, you'll believe I mean it." "I do believe you mean it," Hope said. "I just don't think meaning it changes what already happened. You didn't make a mistake once, Jae-Won. You made it in front of 200 people, with a ring, on one knee. That's not a slip. That's a choice you made with your whole chest." "I know." His voice cracked slightly. "I think about it every single day." "Good," Hope said, not unkindly, just honestly. "I hope you carry it for a long time. Not because I want you to suffer, but because that's what happens when you throw away something real for something that only felt urgent in the moment. You don't get to skip the consequences just because you've realized your mistake. She walked away before he could respond, back toward Ethan, who was watching the exchange from across the room, with an expression carefully arranged into neutrality, though she could see the tension in his shoulders had eased slightly the moment she stepped away from Jae-Won. "You handled that better than I would have," Ethan said as she reached him. "I've had practice handling difficult people gracefully. It's most of my job." She took the drink he offered her. "He said he's not with Yuna anymore." "I heard." Ethan's expression flickered, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. "Does that change anything for you?" Hope considered the question seriously, giving it the weight it deserved instead of answering on reflex. "No," she said finally, and meant it. "It doesn't change what he did. It just means he's finally alone with the consequences of it, which honestly feels like exactly where he should be." Across the room, Jae-Won watched them together, watched the easy way Ethan's hand found the small of Hope's back, the way she leaned into it without hesitation, the way she laughed at something he said a moment later, unguarded in a way she'd stopped being with Jae-Won long before the engagement party ever happened. Something in his chest twisted painfully, and he understood, with sudden and unwelcome clarity, that he hadn't lost hope the night he proposed to Yuna. He'd lost her months before that, somewhere in all the small ways he'd stopped choosing her, and the proposal had simply been the moment everyone else finally saw what he'd already done. His father found him near the bar an hour later, swirling a glass of scotch with the particular disappointment he reserved for business failures and family embarrassments alike. "You're staring at her again," his father said. "The Bennett girl. Her name is Hope. I know her name. I also know you're making a spectacle of yourself, watching her across a room while she's on the arm of Ethan Cho, of all people." His father's voice dropped lower, sharper. "Do you understand what it looks like, our family's heir, unable to let go of a woman he publicly humiliated, while she thrives with the one man in this city who's made it his mission to undermine everything we've built? I made a mistake." "You made several," his father said, "but watching you unravel over it in public is quickly becoming the bigger problem. Fix your expression, or fix your feelings. I don't particularly care which, but you will not embarrass this family further tonight." Jae-Won straightened, forcing his face into something neutral, but his eyes found Hope one more time before he turned away, and the look on his face in that unguarded second told a story his father's warning couldn't undo. He wanted her back. Not the memory of her, not the comfortable idea of her, but her, exactly as she was now, standing across the room with her chin high and her laugh unguarded, more herself than she'd been in the final year they'd spent together. And for the first time since the night of his birthday, Jae-Won understood that wanting something back didn't mean he still deserved it. The calls started again within days, but this time they came from numbers Hope didn't recognize, each one more insistent than the last, until she finally understood. Jae-Won had started reaching out through mutual friends, business contacts, anyone who might still have a line to her he hadn't already burned. "He called my old assistant," Hope told Adalas over lunch, stabbing at her salad without much interest in eating it. "Asked her to pass along a message that he wants to meet, that it's important, that it's not about us. Do you believe that?" "Not for a second." Adaise set down her fork. "You know this isn't going to stop unless you make it stop, right? Some men don't understand no until it costs them something." Hope had already started to suspect the same thing, though she hadn't wanted to admit it out loud. There was a particular kind of desperation in the way Jae-Won had started showing up places he had no reason to be. A coffee shop near her office, a charity event she'd mentioned once in passing to a mutual friend, always with some excuse ready, always positioned to look accidental. It stopped looking accidental the night he showed up at Bennett events after hours, standing outside her office door when she was the last one left in the building, finishing invoices with the lights low and the street outside gone quiet. "How did you get in here?" Hope asked, startled, pulling her cardigan tighter around herself as she stood. "Your night security remembered me from the engagement party planning." Jae-Won held up both hands, an attempt at looking harmless that didn't quite land, given the late hour and the empty office around them. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just needed to see you without an audience for once. There's a reason I haven't answered your calls, Jae-Won." "I know." He took a step closer, and Hope resisted the urge to step back, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. About what I threw away. About what it means that you've built a whole new life in the time it took me to realize I destroyed the old one." "I didn't build a new life to punish you," Hope said. "I built it because I had to survive what you did. I know that too." His voice cracked slightly, and for a moment, he looked less like the confident heir she'd fallen in love with 3 years ago, and more like someone who'd finally run out of ways to outrun his own regret. "Hope, I can't stop thinking about you. Every day, I see you with him, and I know I have no right to feel anything about it, but it's tearing me apart. That's not my problem to solve anymore. I know I don't deserve a second chance." He was closer now, close enough that she could see the exhaustion carved into his face, the sleepless nights that had clearly been eating at him since the gala. "But I'm asking anyway, because losing you completely feels worse than any humiliation I could survive by asking." Hope studied him for a long moment, searching for even a flicker of the man she used to love, and found only the wreckage of someone who'd mistaken comfort for certainty until it was too late to matter. "You had me, Jae-Won," she said quietly. "For 3 years, you had all of me. You didn't lose me to Ethan Cho. You lost me the night you decided a woman from your past mattered more than the woman standing in front of 200 guests, waiting for you to choose her. I can't give you something back that you threw away with your own hands, no matter how much you regret throwing it. Is there nothing I can do?" "You can leave," Hope said, "and let me build the rest of my life without wondering when you're going to show up somewhere I didn't invite you." Something in his expression hardened then, regret curdling into something closer to wounded pride. "This is because of him. You wouldn't be saying any of this if Ethan Cho hadn't swept in the same night you needed someone to lean on. Don't do that." Hope's voice sharpened. "Don't turn my choice into something that happened to me instead of something I decided. I kissed him because I was done letting you decide how my story went. Everything since then has been mine, not something he talked me into." Jae-Won left without another word, and Hope sat alone in her office for a long time afterward, hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the particular exhaustion of having to defend a decision that should never have needed defending in the first place. She told Ethan about it that weekend, the two of them walking along the waterfront in the cool evening air, and watched his jaw tighten as she recounted the visit to her office. "He went to your workplace, after hours, alone." Ethan's voice had gone carefully controlled, the tone of a man working hard to keep something dangerous contained. "Hope, that's not regret. That's someone who doesn't understand boundaries because no one has ever made him respect them before. I handled it. I know you did. That's not what concerns me." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I've watched families like his operate my whole career. When men like Jae-Won can't win something back through charm, they escalate. I need you to tell me if he shows up again, anywhere, and I need you to consider getting security for your office in the meantime. You're not responsible for protecting me from my ex, Ethan." "No," he agreed, "but I care about what happens to you, and that means I don't get to pretend I didn't hear what you just told me." His voice softened, losing its edge. "I'm not trying to control anything you do. I just don't want to find out something happened to you and know I could have said something sooner." Hope looked at him for a long moment, struck by the difference between this and every conversation she'd had with Jae-Won over the last month. Ethan wasn't asking her to feel guilty for his worry. He wasn't using concern as a leash. He was simply telling her the truth and trusting her to do with it what she wanted. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Anything. Why haven't you tried anything with me yet? It's been over a month. Most people would have pushed for more by now." Ethan considered the question with the same careful weight he gave everything, unhurried, unwilling to offer an easy answer just because it was expected. "Because I watched you lose the ability to trust your own judgment the night Jae-Won humiliated you in front of everyone who mattered. I'm not interested in becoming another person who makes you doubt what you actually want by rushing you into something before you're ready to want it clearly." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. "When you're certain, Hope, you'll tell me. Until then, I'd rather have all of you slowly than part of you too soon." Hope felt something in her chest give way entirely, the last guarded piece of herself finally softening toward a man who'd never once asked her to be anything other than exactly what she was. She didn't know that 3 blocks away, Jae-Won sat alone in his car outside her apartment building, watching the lit window of her 4th-floor unit, phone in hand, scrolling through years of old photographs he couldn't bring himself to delete, and making a decision that would set the next several weeks on a much darker course than anyone at that charity gala could have predicted. The story broke on a Wednesday morning, splashed across 3 different business outlets before Hope had even finished her first cup of coffee. Reed Development faces fraud allegations in Lakeshore contract dealings. She read the headline twice before the significance of it fully landed, and when it did, her stomach dropped. The article detailed allegations that Reed Development had falsified financial documents during their original bid for the Lakeshore contract, the same deal Ethan's company had won 2 years earlier. Buried in the 3rd paragraph was a detail that made Hope's blood run cold. An anonymous source close to the Bennett event's founder had allegedly provided documentation supporting the claims. Her phone was already ringing by the time she finished reading. "Hope, what is this?" Adese's voice was tight with panic. "There's a source close to you, named in a fraud investigation against Jae-Won's family company. Please tell me you had nothing to do with this." "I had nothing to do with this." Hope's hands were shaking as she scrolled through the article again, searching for anything that might explain how her name had gotten tangled into a corporate scandal she knew nothing about. "Adese, I don't even know what documents they're talking about." "Someone's going to think you did this. Or worse, someone's going to think Ethan did this and used you to do it." The thought hit her like a physical blow. She called Ethan immediately, and he picked up on the first ring, his voice already tense. "You've seen it," he said, not a question. "Ethan, tell me you had nothing to do with this." There was a pause, just long enough to make Hope's stomach twist. "I didn't leak anything to the press, Hope. I want you to hear that clearly. But I've suspected for over a year that Reed Development falsified parts of their original bid. I never acted on it, because pursuing it publicly would have looked exactly like what it looks like right now, a personal vendetta dressed up as justice." "Then who leaked it?" "I don't know, but I have a guess, and you're not going to like it." Hope's mind raced ahead of him. "Jae-Won." "Think about it," Ethan said. "He's desperate. He's watched you build a life without him for over a month. If he can't win you back by chasing you, maybe he decided the next best thing was destroying the one thing standing between you and him, my reputation, by making it look like I orchestrated a smear campaign using you as my source." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. If the public believed Hope had fed insider information to Ethan, her business would be finished, painted as a woman who'd used a broken engagement to extract corporate secrets for a new lover. It didn't matter that none of it was true. In the world Jae-Won's family operated in, perception moved faster than fact. Hope's phone buzzed with 3 new emails before she'd even processed the call. 2 clients canceling contracts, citing concerns about her professional discretion. A third asking for a call to discuss whether Bennett Events could continue as planned for their wedding. "I'm losing clients," Hope said, her voice hollow. "Real ones, Ethan. People I've worked with for years. I know, I'm already on it. I've reached out to my legal team to get ahead of the narrative before it spreads further, and I'm going to personally call every venue and vendor relationship that's been questioning your involvement. This isn't your fight to clean up. It became my fight the moment someone used my history with his family to destroy something you built with your own hands. His voice hardened. I'm not going to let that happen, Hope. Not to you. She spent the rest of the day fielding calls, each one chipping away at the calm she'd worked so hard to maintain over the last month. By evening, exhausted and raw, she opened her door to find Jae-Won standing in the hallway, and something in her finally snapped. "Get out of my building," she said, before he could speak. "Hope, I saw the article. I wanted to make sure you were okay." "Don't." Her voice shook with a fury she'd been holding back all day. "Don't you dare stand there and pretend concern, when I know exactly what you did." Jae-Won's face went pale. "I didn't leak anything. You expect me to believe that. The same week I refuse you for the third time. A fraud story breaks naming an anonymous source close to me, conveniently destroying my business and painting me as someone who used you for corporate secrets. That's not a coincidence, Jae-Won. That's a message. I would never do that to you. You proposed to another woman in front of 200 people who came to celebrate our engagement," Hope said, voice cold and steady now. "I stopped believing what you would or wouldn't do to me the moment I watched that ring box open." Jae-Won's composure finally cracked. "I didn't leak the documents to hurt you. I leaked them because I wanted Cho's company implicated too, wanted people asking questions about both companies instead of just mine. I didn't think about what it would do to your business. I swear to you, I didn't think that far ahead." The confession hung in the air between them, ugly and undeniable, and Hope felt something in her chest go very still. "You just admitted it," she said quietly. Jae-Won's eyes widened as he realized what he'd done, the words already out, already impossible to take back. "Hope, please, I can fix this. I can go to the press, clarify that you had nothing to do with it. You're not fixing anything." Hope's voice was steady now, steadier than she'd expected it to be. "You're going to leave, and you're going to send whatever retraction your lawyers can draft by morning, or I will make sure every business contact you have knows exactly what you just told me." "You wouldn't." "Try me," Hope said, and closed the door in his face before he could say another word. She stood with her back against the door for a long moment, breathing hard, before she finally called Ethan and repeated everything Jae-Won had just admitted. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with a fury Hope had never heard from him before. "He confessed," Ethan said slowly, "to you, directly. Word for word. Hope, that changes everything. That's not just a corporate leak anymore. That's defamation, and if he admitted it to you outright, we have leverage he can't talk his way out of." A pause, and when Ethan spoke again, his voice had softened considerably. "Are you okay? Really okay? Not the version you tell everyone else." Hope let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, feeling the exhaustion of the entire day finally catch up to her all at once. "I don't know yet. I think I will be. Do you want me to come over?" She considered the question, considered everything that had happened since the night of that rooftop kiss, every version of herself she'd had to become to survive it, and for the first time, she realized the answer wasn't complicated at all. "Yes," she said, "I do." Ethan arrived within the hour, and Hope opened the door to find him standing there, with none of his usual composure, just quiet urgency in his eyes as he studied her face for any sign that she wasn't as steady as she'd sounded on the phone. "I'm okay," she said, before he could ask. "Tired, angry, but okay." He stepped inside, and for a long moment neither of them said anything, the weight of the entire month settling between them in a silence that didn't need filling. Then Hope did something she hadn't planned, reaching for his hand and holding it like an anchor. "I'm done being careful," she said. "I'm done waiting until I'm certain enough to deserve wanting something good. Jae-Won took 3 years of my life convincing me that love meant shrinking myself to fit someone else's comfort. You've spent a month teaching me the opposite, without ever once asking me to prove I was ready for it." Ethan's expression softened into something unguarded. "Hope. Let me finish." She held his hand tighter. "I don't need you to fix what he broke. I don't need you to fight my battles or clean up his mess. I just need you to know that somewhere between the rooftop and tonight, I stopped seeing you as the man I kissed for revenge and started seeing you as the person I actually want." He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at her the way he had that very first night, like he'd been waiting patiently for exactly this, and then he pulled her into an embrace that had nothing rushed or urgent about it, just steady, quiet certainty. "I've wanted to hear that for longer than I probably should admit," he said against her hair. "But I meant what I told you weeks ago. I'd rather have all of you slowly than part of you too soon. Tonight, I finally believe I have both." The legal fallout for Jae-Won came swiftly once his own recorded confession, which Hope's building security footage had inadvertently captured through the hallway camera, made its way into the hands of Ethan's legal team. Reed Development issued a public retraction within 72 hours, clearing Hope's name entirely and naming Jae-Won directly as the source of the leaked, weaponized documents. His father, furious and humiliated in front of the very business community he'd spent decades cultivating, removed him from any active role in the company's upcoming ventures. Hope watched the story unfold from a careful distance, refusing to gloat, though she allowed herself one small, satisfied breath when she read the final line of the retraction, naming her innocent in the entire affair. Yuna, for her part, disappeared from the narrative entirely within weeks, quietly moving back overseas once it became clear Jae-Won had spent their entire brief reconciliation still consumed by a woman he'd thrown away, rather than the one who'd come back for him. She never publicly commented on any of it, and Hope found she didn't need her to. Some stories simply ended the way they were always going to, quietly and without resolution, because they were never real enough to deserve one. Bennett events recovered faster than Hope expected. The clients who'd canceled in panic came back once the retraction cleared her name, and several new ones arrived, specifically because of the story, drawn to a woman who'd survived very public humiliation and come out the other side building something even stronger than before. She hired 2 new coordinators that spring, finally able to breathe under the weight of a business that had outgrown what she alone could carry. Jae-Won reached out one final time, months later, a short email rather than a surprise visit, as if he'd finally learned the lesson that showing up uninvited had never once worked in his favor. "I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know I understand now what I lost, and I understand I have no right to ask for it back. I hope you're happy, Hope. You deserve to be, more than anyone I've ever known." She read it once, felt nothing sharp or bitter rise up in response, and let that be its own kind of answer. She didn't reply. Some closures didn't need words, only the quiet fact of moving forward without them. The following spring, Ethan took her back to the same waterfront where they'd walked the night he first told her he wasn't going anywhere. This time, he didn't have a ring box hidden in his jacket for show, no crowd of strangers to witness the moment, nothing performative about it at all, just the two of them, the water, and the particular kind of quiet that had become their language over the past year. "I've been thinking," he said, "about how we started. A kiss that was never supposed to mean anything, born out of the worst night of your life." "I remember," Hope said, smiling. "I don't think I believed in fate before that night. I still don't, entirely. But I believe in this, in choosing someone every single day because they make you better, not because circumstance handed them to you." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I'm not going to get down on one knee in a room full of strangers and turn this into a spectacle you didn't ask for." I just want to ask you quietly, the way I should have asked everything else since the day I met you. Will you build the rest of this life with me? Hope felt tears rise, not from grief this time, but from the particular, overwhelming relief of being chosen fully, deliberately, without an audience required to make it real. Yes, she said. Obviously yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, simple and elegant, nothing about it designed to be photographed or performed for anyone but the two of them, and Hope understood, standing there in the quiet evening light, that this was what it had always been supposed to feel like. Not a rescue, not a revenge story turned love story for the sake of narrative neatness, just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of someone else's mistake, and decided, deliberately and without hesitation, to build something entirely their own. If Hope's story taught her anything, it was this. Sometimes the worst night of your life isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's simply the moment the wrong ending falls away, so the right one finally has room to begin. She never went looking for revenge that night on the rooftop. She went looking for her own dignity, and found, unexpectedly, a love that never once asked her to shrink herself to keep it. That, in the end, was worth every bit of the humiliation it took to find it.